So the monthly card reveal is finally here, and for the month of November, we get to receive Battle Reeve of Dusk. Battle Reeve of Dusk is a 6 Magicka 3/3 creature that has a summon effect, so when it comes into play, friendly creatures are going to get +1/+1 for each keyword that they have. Now, most people's initial reaction to this is going to be that the card doesn't seem very good or it kind of feels lackluster. I think the most obvious comparison that people are making are to a card like Legion Prefect, which is 7 Magicka for a 4/4, but all friendly creatures get +1/+1. So, on the one hand, it's one cheaper, so it comes into play cheaper, but its stats on its own body are a little bit smaller. On the other hand, you have the potential to get a larger buff. If your creatures, for example, have more than one keyword, then they're going to get +1/+1 more than one time when this comes into play. So they're not exactly like an apples to apples comparison, but I think it's pretty easy or pretty understandable why people would make that comparison. And since the Legion Prefect doesn't really see play now, I can understand why people would look at this monthly card reward and say, this isn't going to see play. So instead of just saying like it's going to be absolute junk and it won't see play, we're going to pretend that we expect it to see play, and so let's talk about the kind of cards that we would play with it. Sticking Great in Intelligence, because this card is an intelligence card. I think there are some obvious ones that synergize with it. So anything that gives your creatures keywords is going to be pretty good. I'm immediately thinking of like Lesser Ward or Ward Crafter, because those can grant ward, which is a keyword to a creature. Royal Sage has a trigger that can grant your entire team a random keyword, which can go a long way. And Mentor's Ring is another option where you can spread keywords across your entire board. So in those instances, you can kind of set up your creatures ahead of time and then play this to get a big tempo swing in your favor. One potential drawback to something like that, and one of the reasons why I think that this card is, again, for the most part seen as being, kind of bad, is that this card kind of ends up being a win more card, in that it requires you to have an established board for you to get value. And even more so, you have to have a board of creatures that already have keywords, right? So you have to have valuable creatures on the board and then play this to make them even more valuable. So, again, that's one potential drawback. Because it's based on keywords, I think the other obvious include or mention in the same breath as this card would be Munda Stone. I think for obvious reasons. Munda Stone's going to grant everything you play a free keyword, and if they've already got keywords, then you have even more keywords, so that when you do play Battle Reeve of Dusk, you're going to get that kind of value. If you were to play this in a class and you were really going to try to push this idea of like a tempo play, and then maybe use Battle Reeve of Dusk as almost like a finisher, right? Or something that's going to like kind of buff your squad for 1 or 2 turns to kind of finish somebody off. The pairing that I would consider making, or the one I think makes the most sense, would be to pair it with Agility, so to play Assassin. Assassin, unfortunately, already has some pretty popular archetypes already with Prophecy and Action, so I don't see that this deck or this style would overthrow those, but you do have some pretty cool creatures with multiple keywords that already exist in Assassin. So things like Fighters Guild Recruit has 2 keywords, 3 if you count Prophecy. I'm not sure how this card's going to interact with Prophecy. I think that's an interesting thought, right? But if we're thinking about like the traditional 7 that, say, Munda Stone would grant, right? Fighters Guild Recruit has 2. Giant Bat has 2. Again, if you're starting to get out Prophecy, then you start running into things like Werebat or Black Sap Protector. So once we find out how that interaction is going to work, that'll also go a long way. But there are a lot of guard creatures in Agility, so when you think of things like Courier, that immediately stands out. There are some decent creatures in Agility. So if I was going to pair, I would likely play Intelligence with Agility, just because you get creatures that you for the most part would want to run already anyways, and then you can kind of combine those with some of the keyword creatures, and then this card to again maybe create some sort of scenario where you're getting like a big swing because you play this card. Maybe 2 or 3 guys get +2 or +3, and that's enough to push for lethal. So that's like the best idea I got, right now. I think time will tell how it shapes out over the meta. Um, yeah, I just feel like the card is, on the surface, it appears pretty lackluster because it again does kind of feel like a win more card. So for me, I think it's certainly going to come down to whether or not Prophecy counts for the trigger, right? Is it looking for the 7 that Mundustone can grant, or does Prophecy in this instance count as a keyword and then Battle Reeve of Dusk would buff it? Because if that is the case, I could totally see Battle Reeve of Dusk being seen in Prophecy Assassin decks. I think that there is enough value there just because those decks tend to be keyword heavy to begin with, and then if Prophecy also counts and you're getting potentially a bunch of free creatures, you're more likely to have a board and you're more likely to get the most benefit out of something like this. So if Prophecy does end up counting for this interaction, I could see that deck running this. I don't know if I would run 3 copies, a full set of them, but even as like a 1 or a 2 of, as again, kind of that idea of like it being a finisher, you give your squad a big buff. I could see potential value there. So keep an eye out for how it interacts with Prophecy in terms of that counting as a keyword. Otherwise, enjoy the card, assuming that you don't automatically soul trap it. If I had to guess what most people are going to do based on the comments I've seen already for this card, I imagine most people are thinking they're getting free gems this month, but the collector in me wants to keep it and maybe try out a deck or two and see how it works. So that is the monthly reveal for November. If you have any deck ideas or any cool interactions that I did not cover, I would be happy to hear about it in the comments, and as always, I will see you next time.